Welcome to the High Agency Podcast with your host, Noah Ravoy.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. Today I'm back with my friend and guest, Leila Tomasone, and we're going to be talking about a really interesting subject that was triggered by a National Geographic article on objectifying women. Now remember, this is National Geographic, the same magazine that became famous for showing pictures of naked tribal women. They're talking about the ideas of men objectifying women. They're making some really specific judgments about moral judgments about how they feel that affects women or how that it should or shouldn't be. And we're going to discuss it. We're going to discuss the morality of objectifying women and how men's minds work. Because I think that the people who did this study must have started off with a fairly poor understanding of how men's minds work. You can see this by the suppositions that they come to from their evidence. I'm going to pop up the article for now, but first I wanted to say thank you, Leila, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Always fun to have a conversation and discuss hot topics.
Yeah, I really like having you on the show, and you have every time we have a conversation, you have a very good, mature, feminine view on things. And no matter how mature my masculine view can be, I can't see things from the feminine view because I'm a man. And so it really helps to have women on the show that can do that have that capacity. And I appreciate you joining us with that. So I'm going to pop up the article, and it's titled, "Bikinis Make Men See Women as Objects." Now, this is a conclusion. They conclude it's the bikinis that make men see women as objects. And they use a brain scan. So different parts of the brain are associated with different types of thinking. And there's a part of the brain that's associated with the objective manipulation of tools and basically getting things done with three-dimensional world. And that part of the brain is different than the part of the brain that lights up when we have, for example, a discussion with someone. So what's happening right now between you and I, we're having a discussion, there'll be a different part of the brain light up. Now, if you're discussing tools, I guess maybe they both light up. But in this case, they're using pictures to trigger the brain. So it says, sexy women in bikinis really do inspire some men to see them as objects, according to a new study of male behavior. It talks about them being shown pictures of scantily clad women. And let's see here where it does mention that a lot of these photos were without a face. So they're like neck down shots of the woman, which if you see a neck down shot of a human being, we don't tend to recognize them as a human being because in nature, the only time you see a person without a head, they're not a human being anymore. So we tend to view that differently. And I like how they keep saying how shocking these findings are. It's shocking that men see women in bikinis differently than when they're fully clothed. What do you think about that, Leila?
Yeah, I mean, so many issues, so many things to say about this. Well, first of all, I heard that from someone who'd actually read more about the study, or it was reviewed in more detail, was that their conclusion about viewing women as tools or objects was based on the fact that they would see the picture of the tool, and before seeing the sexy women, they would say, "Oh, it's a hammer. Oh, it's a wrench or whatever," and then afterwards, they would describe what they would do with the tool. I push, I grasp, I handle. So then they kind of put themselves in the active mode in describing the tools that they saw. And so that just seems like such a huge leap to go from, oh, that's a tool, to, oh, this is how I would use the tool. That means that they view the women as objects. I don't quite get that leap. And then when they say that the whole region of the brain associated with about another person's intentions, went completely dark. And that's just so scary and shocking that now they have no empathy whatsoever. These judgments are just like
Yeah, the word dehumanizing, they
stretches.
capitalize it, and it's the heading of one of the sections here. It's dehumanizing.
Just such huge leaps. And it's like, first of all, like, who is this doing the study? Like, why was this important to them? To me, as like, I don't know, I don't want to give all the way my points away, but like, I just feel like it's going after some kind of thought crime and trying to prove some logical, like, I don't know, string some ideas together to prove thought crimes, that men are sexist and they're horrible. And it's like, yeah, if men and women think differently, and like, that's why is that like something to?
Well, it's interesting that some of the studies I read a few years back on why men and women's brains work differently is that one of the key components, there's some structural components, but is the quantity of testosterone. So as a man, for example, gets more testosterone, he tends to be more systematizing. That's what happens when you objectify things. You're systematizing. You're saying this is an object, it fits into this category, it is used in this way, this is how it functions. We become naturally more systematizing. If you take it to a very high extreme, if you have a lot of testosterone exposure in utero, so while you're a fetus, you can end up with being so far on that side that you end up certain kinds of autistic spectrum issues. That's not maybe where they all come from, but some of them come from there. And if you have lower testosterone, you will be more empathizing instead of systematizing. This is even true amongst women. Women with more testosterone are more systematizing. Women with less testosterone are more empathizing. And it is not necessarily, we're talking in society all the time about you were born that way. Well, this is how men were born. We were born systematizing, some of us more than others. They mentioned these hostile sexist, because if you're a man and you believe that women want to enter male spaces, which lots and lots of women will tell you is true, if you believe women when they tell you that, then you are a hostile sexist. Apparently, they were more systematizing. Well, that makes sense. Men who recognize women's behavioral patterns and believe what they're saying because they say they want to go into men's spaces, those men are more likely to be systematizing. They're able to gather information, systematize it, and say, yeah, that seems to be happening. Of course, they're going to objectify more.
Right.
But it is interesting how they link these things morally. There's very little attempts here to link things scientifically.
No. Yeah. I mean, what you described about seeing things as an object, and then that makes sense with what they said, like, that you put yourself in like the active role of like, what can I use this for? What can I do with it? That to me says productivity. Like, you're going to, you understand what you can get done, and you probably get a lot more done when you can see things that way, as opposed to like spending a lot of time, according to this and what we're talking about, it looks like the opposite is like spending a lot of time judging people's intentions, which really gets a lot of us in trouble. And why are we doing that? I mean, as a dating and relationship coach, I really try to encourage people not to try to judge people's intentions and judge them by their actions and their behavior instead. Wouldn't that be more serious, like what you actually do with the information than like how you look at it? And where was I going with that? Oh, and just that, like, our brains and what our thoughts is like our last private domain. If you're in a relationship with someone and you're married and you share the house and you share the kids and the money and everything, like, shouldn't like something be off limits? Maybe you could have some private thoughts that no one else is like privy to.
Yeah, it is interesting how they want to break down these basic instincts inside of a man's brain that are going on and then attach moral objectives to them. And this isn't just a problem in this. This is moralizing. This isn't science. What they're doing is moralizing. And it's not just a problem there. I see it in certain Christians do this too. And I'm going to explain something about how men's brains work, and then we'll see how both of those two groups are getting it wrong. So men are healthy men with high testosterone are extremely observant. And if a woman walks into their visual sphere, so into their space, or they hear her, and like I will hear a woman walking behind me and I know it's a woman, not a man. So we're pretty good at that. Women walk softer. They have a different cadence to their walk. And we immediately will look, whether it's a man or a woman. And within 3 seconds, the lizard part of our brain, the little part at the back says, is she attractive or not? Which, I mean, deep down at the back says, is that a woman that I would have sex with if that was a possibility or not? This is not something we have control over. That happens before our neocortex, the rational part in the front, even gets involved in the thought. That rational part in the front says, no, you can't, you're married. Stop looking. And that is the rational part that comes afterwards. But that initial instinct is there. And right following that, there's about a 2 or 3 second space in which we say, does she belong to anyone in the room here? Is she the woman of any man in this room? And can I take that man in a fight? And that's the things that go through a man's head when he sees a woman walk into a room. It is instinctual, it is instantaneous, and it has no moral implications because it's the same as tapping you on the foot and your leg shoots off like a nerve reaction. It's a reaction that happens in the minds of men. In fact, men who don't go through that are probably in some way damaged in the way that they process information. There are men who don't have any clue what happens around them. They're completely unconscious. That's not healthy. The men who make those conscious judgments, that is a healthy way for men to behave. Now, this here is saying that the normal behavior of a healthy adult male is morally wrong. I've seen that with some Christians, not all, but I've seen that with some as well, that even if you have sinful instincts, well, God created us the way that we are, and those instincts are almost universal to all men. It's not like one man has that, in which case it might be something wrong with him. These are fairly universal. The question is what do we do about it? So
right.
This is part of this article is they're judging people's thinking. There's no even thought about how do they act on these thoughts.
Right, exactly. I mean, even the fact of calling it a behavior study and calling this like mental thought process a behavior, it's not. It's in the mind. It's neurons shooting off and firing in the brain. It's not an activity. It's not a thing that anyone like does in the real world. And you're right. I have seen Christians using this study to justify, whatever their views are, and totally moralizing. Yeah, you're right. And I mean, we very easily could look at how women judge intentions and that guy's a creep or whatever as being very, very similar. And because it can be used for good or bad, like that instinct in a woman could be used to keep her safe, but it also could be used to be discriminatory towards men or whatever. So really what is done about it is the important thing, not the fact that thoughts happen.
Yeah. Well, in fact, and this is for Christians as well, that the Apostle Paul said that in his body would come up desires and things that he wanted to do or that he wanted to not do either way, and that he would have to fight with that. And basically, he's describing that process of you have instincts that pop up that you really shouldn't be doing, either the desire to be overly passive or the desire to be overly aggressive and following up on your instincts. And you have to use your self-control to manage that. That is the essence of agency, is controlling your instincts, not deadening them, not making it so you don't have instincts anymore.
Right.
Because that's a problem as well. I've had clients that were unable to they're unable to have healthy sex with their wife because their instincts were completely dead. And they couldn't just turn off all the thinking. They were thinking so much when they were going to go have sex that it got in the way of what is supposed to be a very natural instinctual process. And so men who have completely turned off their instincts are going to end up suffering one way or the other. And that's the difficulty of life, is that we have instincts and then we have to control them and we have to manage them. I like what she says at the end here. This is very interesting. But Fisk doesn't think such an experiment by the way, Fisk is a woman, would the one in charge of this experiment, would work the same way, because women usually react to the men they desire by interpreting their minds, thinking about what they're interested in, and then trying to please them, she said. I guarantee you she's never done any of those things with a man.
Right.
But yeah, and I think you should have to post physique if you're going to post an article with your opinions. But I guarantee you, though, that this is very interesting. I've done this big scientific study about how men feel, and I've interpreted it a certain way. There's not even a point in doing it with women, because I mean, everyone knows women are perfect. They couldn't possibly objectify men. That and that alone is funny. Now there is a suggestion here that what women objectify men as is not sexually, but as a tool to accomplish goals. So as a resource acquisition tool, or as a protective tool. And there is a lot of women talk about that, and they're very open about it. And yeah, that is a fair thing to say. It is fair for women to expect, in exchange for their loyalty, their fidelity, them having children, or helping look after your children, whatever it happens to be, and looking after your home, that they in turn get something out of it. It has to be a reciprocal relationship. And I wouldn't judge women negatively for that either. As long as what they're asking for is reciprocal, then it's natural and fair.
Yeah, and the instincts balance each other out for a purpose of being able to create a family and keep them alive and have a legacy, keep the genes going. And what you were saying about the fact that we have the instincts and that we have to make choices, it makes life difficult, but it also makes good and evil possible. Like, what is the point of free will if you don't have anything, bad to choose as a choice? Like, you can't make only good choices based on only good options and then call yourself moral and virtuous. Like, you have to make those choices based on some, negative instincts that arise. And that is why it's possible to be a moral person. Like, what is it? Jordan Peterson says that, it's, a good man isn't good unless he's dangerous, right? Like, he has to actually have some possibility of violence and danger in order to make the moral choice.
Yeah, in fact, I tweeted this a little while ago, and it was very well received, that women are looking for a man who could sleep with any woman he wants, but chooses to sleep with them. And it's the man who has no interest in other women. I have had women say to me, he doesn't really seem that interested in women, and what they're implying is that maybe he's not straight. And so that in complete deadness to the existence of beauty, that is recognized immediately by women as being unhealthy. We are meant to appreciate beauty wherever it is, including in other people. It doesn't mean that we are going to, get physically involved with those people. It's just a matter of seeing someone that's beautiful and saying, that's a beautiful person. I enjoy looking at a beautiful person. And that's what it is. Yeah. Now, I do think that adding these moral implications into what people are thinking, and it's a way of reducing the moral judgment for what they're actually doing.
Yeah, it definitely blurs lines and makes objective, like virtue or truth, or what is good or evil, kind of seem irrelevant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. One thing I think that article is very interesting. I think we've talked about that as much as we can talk on that. And one other thing I wanted to speak with you about too, when we were talking today, is to speak about your path over the last few years, because I've had a chance to watch you grow tremendously in the time that I've known you, and it comes from ignoring articles like this and doing exactly what you said, judging things based on what people are doing, And that even means judging yourself based on what you're doing. I think one of the things that really gets in our way of self-improvement is judging who we are by what we're thinking and not what we're actually doing and accomplishing. And when you made that shift, that mindset shift, it was obvious and visible to everyone around you. Could you describe that a little bit, how that worked for you?
Sure. Yeah. And sort of bridging with the article a little bit, like the way I see it as a woman and someone who like teaches femininity and helps women discover what their true femininity and their feminine energy is and feels like, and they have to like revisit and find it again. And because I went through that journey too, like the articles like that, if you're going to judge men harshly or negatively for having those instincts, then the next trip and the next step down the line is that women are wrong for wanting men who see their beauty, notice their beauty, like, and that's kind of how I, what I believed at my kind of starting point in my transformation was that beauty is what would you say that the mainstream culture says about beauty?
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, or we're told don't focus on, don't worry about looks, just focus on virtue.
Yeah, it's completely subjective. There's no actual standard for beauty. There's no actual way to control beauty. If you just happen to be blessed as beautiful, then that actually doesn't make you any better than anyone else. I'm not saying it does make you better, but it's like that
it makes you better than you would be if you weren't beautiful.
But the implication is that there's like you've got some privilege, you've got some advantage you don't deserve, and you should do everything you can to like level the playing field and like not acknowledge that advantage at all. And so just all of these messages were completely muddled in my mind, and so much confusion, so much indecision and chaos, as you can tell just from how it sounds to say it. That like I couldn't even decide whether to take a shower in the course of my day, like when or if I would take a shower, like would just take up tons of like space in my mind, which is so weird to say, but it was like I really needed to like you said, concentrate on what is the doing, what are the steps, are my goals and values as I would state them, as anyone would say, like what's important to you. Is what I'm doing throughout the day actually in furtherance of those goals, or is it just kind of killing time and self-indulgent and, actually wasting what I have been blessed with in my life, and sort of, that's not sustainable. That's going to degrade over time. And that's what we're told too, right? Like, over time, as you get older, like you get worse, and like life is less enjoyable, it's less fun. And so you got to like make the most of it while you can, which means drinking, eating too much, promiscuous sex or whatever. And so yeah, there was a lot of like awakening to what is objective, like truth, like what, and don't we actually know it? Like, can't we actually feel it? And when we're told by cultural messages that what we are feeling is not true, then you like can't even trust yourself at all. And so that was a big process that I went through, was learning, what I observe and feel actually does correspond with reality. And I can trust that process in myself. And so that's what I do with women now. I try to help them along that same kind of path. I think because we are biological creatures and have space and physical reality, that there's certain things that are common to us. There's certain elements that we all go through and needing. I know you talk about self-love, and that was a journey that I went through, like figuring out what that means to all of us. But then there's always these common themes that we can relate to in each other.
Yeah, everyone's stories have a lot of similarities. Actually, from listening to hundreds and hundreds of people tell their story, and they get about halfway through, and I'm like, okay, I've seen this pattern before, and I already know the rest of the story. I politely let them finish, of course, but I've seen that story, and I can kind of categorize these down into men have about a half dozen or a dozen different stories. Women have about the same amount of different stories, and your life went one of these ways. And hearing for us, and you have something similar, you get to hear so many people tell their story that there starts to become patterns. And almost everyone thinks, I'm the only one who went through this. This is so horrible. No one else went through this. How do I get help for this unique problem? And we're like, well, I had someone had the same problem earlier in the week. And this is what they had been doing, and this is how they got better. And something similar will work for you. A great example is that millions of women getting into their late 30s, early 40s are starting to be concerned about maintaining their marriage in the long run. They're starting to feel a separation, a distance from their husband. He's hitting his career income, his peak. So he's very often very focused at work. The kids are now old enough that they don't need constant attention. And a lot of women end up feeling very alone, very purposeless. And they start to, can start to affect their health. It can start to affect their mental health. And they have a legitimate concern because it isn't unheard of for men to see the woman spiraling, and instead of helping her, to abandon the marriage. That happens. Even though women leave most of the marriages, there's a lot of times the man sees that spiral and kind of pushes her out. And yes, she leaves, but he's making it uncomfortable so that she will go. What kind of advice would you give to women who want to make sure that as they get older and as their family changes, because the children are changing and eventually leaving home, how can they continue to strengthen that relationship with their husband and keep a strong family into old age?
Yeah. And it's interesting what you're just saying about kind of finding common stories and how our paths are so similar is that's really comforting, actually, even though we're told that we're all unique and special and no one else is like we are. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of true to some degree, but it also overlooks the fact that there are common solutions. There are other people that have been through it, and you can get help and you can learn these skills. I was just talking to a client yesterday about how I think there's this prevailing belief that relationship skills are not something you can learn, that it's something that just happens to you and you don't really have any control over it. And I encourage women, you do have to maintain, what makes you special in a relationship, and not let yourself just blur into the other people in your family. That's called codependency. Not knowing what you want for yourself is not healthy. And so you have to really plan on these different stages of life where that you've got some thread of continuity. And so for myself and I think for others, that women should be helping other women. We, whatever we've been through, it can help someone else who's going through it, through something similar. There's always common elements, like we said. So so definitely maintaining hobbies, friendships, and focusing on your own personal growth and self-care. Like I said, if you don't know what you want, that's not healthy. You can't actually improve your relationship or your marriage by just focusing on the other person. You have to.
You can't nag yourself into a better. You can't nag your spouse into a better marriage. It doesn't work.
Yeah, and like you said, while men are growing and excelling, then women, or sometimes wives, get the impression that they're extraneous to that, but actually they're the vision and the inspiration behind it. And he wouldn't be as successful as he is if it weren't for her support and what she does. So she shouldn't be seeing that as a superfluous role or disposable by any means. The only reason he's doing what he's doing is because of you and because of your family that you've built together. So so I think the complementary view of the different roles and embracing what's different about us really is super helpful to sustaining it. I don't know if that
Yeah,
helps
and I
answer your
think
question.
for a lot, I think for a lot of women too, that shift from being a completely like focused on children to now having that free time, they've kind of lost themselves in that interim, until the kids are in, depending on the age, early teens or whatever, and they've lost themselves in that 10, 15 years. More if you've had a bunch of kids, and refinding out about what it is they want, the hobbies, as you mentioned, rebuilding friendships, and even reconnecting with their husband. I think a lot of times the reason the guys are away at work so much isn't because that's really where they want to be. It's that she was so busy with the kids for so long that they were like, well, I got to do something with my time. And so they ended up focusing on their work. And that has some good financial outcomes, but it's not healthy for the couple. And you can't tell him, you got to come home earlier. What you have to do is, it's more of a pull than a push. You have to, a man who absolutely wants to get home after work, who's like, yeah, man, I don't want to be anywhere else but home with my wife. That man, he doesn't stray. He doesn't get tempted to stray because he wants to be at home. That's where he wants to be. So he doesn't end up facing this overwhelming temptation and feeling alone in it. Men, as we get older, we get more successful. There's a shortage of men compared to women. And there's a lot of men out there they're going to get tempted. And when they have that wife to come home to, that they know that's the place they want to go, that's not a problem, because facing that alone is very difficult for a man. It's cruel to let a man face that without having a happy home to come home to, because no matter how good his determination is to behave in an honorable way, he needs that help. It needs to be a mixture of things that help him to keep on that path.
Well, and he needs to be needed. I mean, think about it. If she took control of the kids and made her life only like, oh, I'm indispensable because I do everything for the kids, then he gets left out. He's not needed. You have to rely on him in order for him to really want to come home, because he has a purpose there. At work, he's got a purpose. Does he have a purpose at home? Or do you do everything? Do you say that you're the only one who can, do the dishes the right way, do the laundry the right way, take care of the kids in the right way? That is super common. And I've even made that mistake myself in my first marriage. And that it's such a huge error that to make your husband, feel unneeded is a real ticket to problems.
Yeah, and you brought up an interesting point too that I think is worth talking about, since a lot of this interview is about you. I've seen some Twitter threads where people said, well, you were divorced, so what can a divorced person possibly know about a successful marriage? How do you respond to that?
It's funny because those same people would probably go to their single friend to get dating advice, because they're in the thick of it. They're dating, so they would know about dating. I'm not dating anymore. So what would you know about it? Well, I mean, obviously somebody who's been through a failure knows a lot about what not to do. That doesn't mean you figured out what you should do, but I'm remarried. I did figure it out. And so you've got that contrast that can be really helpful. A lot of people in successful marriages that have done everything right from the start, they don't know what they did. It's less transparent to them. It's more, if you've always had the same instincts and it was unconscious for you, then how are you going to explain to someone else how to change their life from their unconscious negative patterns to these, unconscious positive, patterns? So you need to have that period of consciousness in order to make the switch, at least.
Yeah, it's very much the same as when you see a person who went through a terrible health crisis, and that causes them to look deeper at how they're maintaining their health. And then they become very robustly healthy afterwards. But now they understand why they're healthy. It wasn't a diet they inherited from their parents, and it's not just their lack of their genes. It ends up being because they've structured their life in such a way to be healthy.
Right.
And I think that's true in many cases for, in your case, you really learned. Again, I remember that was one of the first things that I talked about with you. Because, I think some people know this, that I actually helped Leila as a coach when she was in the dating process, is to make sure that you had taken every lesson you could from your divorce and from your failed marriage so that none of that got repeated again. And you made changes, you made emotional changes, you made psychological changes, and you made behavioral changes that, you look different than you did when you were married before. You behave differently. You're happier than you were before, which is, it's really hard to live with an unhappy woman. You're a happy woman. It makes it a lot easier to live with. And so you've done these things because you took the lessons from what didn't work.
Yes. Yeah. 180-degree difference. And which is funny to go through that experience and meet new people, and they don't know that you've ever been a different person. And so they just think, oh, you're skinny, you wouldn't know, what it's like or whatever. It's like, okay, well, I kind of know. But what you were saying about, oh crap, I don't want to forget. Shoot. Tell me again what you just.
I was saying.
You were just saying.
I mentioned that when you've had some sort of a crisis, you have to learn how to deal with that crisis at a higher level.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, like, your brain knows. Like, when I talk to women that have gotten out of bad relationships, their brain is stuck on it. They know that there's something they need to be learning, and you can't ignore that or go on Zoloft or whatever to dull it and blur it away. You have to process it and really learn those lessons. And if your brain is stuck on it, like, there's a reason, like, that you haven't processed it yet, and you need to learn that lesson in order to have any kind of different experience, or you're just going to keep repeating it.
Yeah, you mentioned going on something like Zoloft to deal with the anxiety of it. What anxiety really is it's your brain saying there's something that you need to be thinking about, and you're ignoring it, and it just pokes you until you start to pay attention to that thing. And I think this even happens to a lot of married women. Many married women, about half are on psychotropic, that Zoloft, all that kind of medication, but half are on psychotropic drugs. And it's because there's something they need to address in their marriage. Now, they can't change their spouse. That's not what you're anxious about. You're anxious about there's something that you should be doing differently. And for one reason or another, lack of humility, or a lack of, or too much shame. Sometimes it kind of looks the same. People have a lot of shame around mistakes they've made, and that's stopping them from getting on to the next stage where they actually deal with the problem. And you can't, those drugs, the moment you go off them, all that comes back because the problem hasn't been dealt with. And I have seen people go from needing medication just to get through each day, to get through normal life tasks. And within a year, they stopped taking it because they said to me, I just don't need it anymore. I don't feel anxious. There's no reason for me to take it. And this has happened consistently when they actually deal with their problems. I think most people that are on psychotropic drugs, it's actually doing them harm because it's preventing them from dealing with the root causes of their problems. And that is something that people like you and I, because we see these patterns, we very quickly know there's something you're not telling me. I think I know what it is. It's probably the root cause of your problem. It's okay to tell me something you're ashamed of. That's a question I ask people in coaching very often. If I can see there's something they're not telling me, is, okay, so now I want you to tell me one thing that you are ashamed of, about your life. And it's a really hard question to ask. And it lets me know if the person is in a frame, in a psychological place to actually benefit from coaching or not. Because maybe they have nothing they're particularly ashamed of, but usually I can tell that by talking to them. But if they have something and they're unwilling to speak about it, and that usually is the good indication that they're not yet ready to grow. So the experience you get of coaching hundreds of people, that is what makes it so powerful to go to a coach. You can go to your friend for advice, and they've probably given advice to 2 or 3 other people. Unlikely that you have a friend that's given advice to hundreds of people and that's tracked their progress over months and years and seen how it's turned out for them. And this is really a power you only get from going to a coach. We always had people in society like that were, community leaders that would be there for advice, be there, the mature women of the community and mature men of the community. And we need them more than ever because we've lost a lot of the systematic structure of society that helps us make good decisions, even if we don't know why. And so now we have to actually figure out why. There's a common discussion that goes around in, you'll see it in Red Pill Twitter, you have Manosphere, and even Trad Twitter, talking about sex before marriage. And society used to have a good answer to that. The answer was no, you don't do it. Mm-hmm. It was really looked down upon, and it just didn't happen. And now we've gone through this, maybe it's good for you, and everyone experimented, and there's lots of sex before marriage. And then we get back around to people going, yeah, actually that wasn't very good. And now we're getting back around again to people learning the hard way that certain types of behaviors, not just that, but other behaviors are unhealthy. Well, you can go to a coach and figure out if what you're doing is working for you way faster than you can on your own. There's no need to spend half a lifetime suffering before you figure out how to live happy.
Yeah, definitely. And to your point about premarital sex, like it maybe did happen, but there were consequences when it happened. You had to get married and you had to have babies. And yeah, that might not always be ideal, but you chose your path, and other people who could see you choose that path and see the consequences then could make different choices. But now when there's no consequences, or at least there always are consequences, but when they're less visible and then we can pretend they're not there, then we have to kind of all make our own mistakes.
Yeah, I think even if it's not visible, it might be more that we are able to put the consequences off. You know, it's kind of like saying, well, I don't want to go to work anymore. I'll just live on my credit cards. You know, you can probably do that for 3 or 4 months and there's no apparent consequences to not going to work anymore. And you know, for 3 months, you look at all those working stiffs and go, oh, it's a bunch of suckers going to work. And then the 3 months come up and you're out of credit card and you're out of credit card credit, and you're in this massive pile of debt. And now you have to go back to work and pay all the bills you paid before, plus all your credit card bills. And so what we do is we just end up putting the costs off into the future. And because we can do that, and because most people don't think very far into the future, we tend to accumulate more costs than we would. You know, back 200 years ago, if someone had sex out of marriage, they might have sex out of marriage once. And then if they get caught, they're going to end up getting married. Or if they get pregnant, they end up getting married. And that's probably the last time that ever happens. Mm-hmm. Whereas now people end up hurting themselves a lot more because they're able to put the payment of those costs off into the future.
Right.
So they make a deeper level of malinvestment. Digging
a deeper hole, not noticing that not only does your neighbor not have that hole, but they've moved forward and they've built something and they've laid bricks down while you are still digging. Like, I think it was Mike Cernovich or somebody said, like, if you want to lose weight, the first thing you need to do is stop overeating. And it's like, you can't just snap your fingers and reverse the damage you've done. It's going to take some effort, but first you have to stop digging.
Yeah, that's a really important point too, that second part of that. Stop digging, but it takes time to reverse the efforts, to reverse the mistakes. And I very often have young people come to me, and generally people get into coaching either because they've achieved the highest they can achieve on their own and they're looking to go up, or because they've hit this bottom that they can't go any deeper, or they'll literally kill themselves and they're looking for somebody to help them dig their way out. And I have very often say the same thing. You've taken 20, 30, whatever years to get into this hole. You're not going to get out in 2 days. This isn't a 2 coaching call and you're done problem. This is something you're going to have to work at, and you're going to have to work in between the coaching sessions in order to make progress. It's not just going to happen in the sessions. And when people really accept that, when they accept that this is a long haul process where it might take them a couple of years to fix a life that's in shambles, then their attitude changes and they really buckle down and get the work done. And it can be painful because initial change is really slow because you have no momentum and you have to start to get momentum. In fact, you have momentum going down. You have to counter that momentum, stop going down, and then build momentum going up. And I've had people near the tail end of that, and they say to me, it's amazing how much faster I can grow when I'm already healthy than when I was before, just trying to do basics.
Yeah, it's definitely a multiplicative process. And right now so you have to stop and take a really good hard look at what the end result is of the path you're going versus actually turning the ship, although it will be painful, but you will eventually build that momentum. And I remembered something I wanted to say earlier, talking about married couples and how you just mentioned real quick, like that you can't change your spouse. Well, so many people want to change their spouse, right? And or want their spouse to change. And that's really how you know that you have changes to make yourself, is that you want your spouse to change. So that's the symptom, is focusing on what they're doing wrong. And the cause is you're not working on yourself and you're not taking the steps you need to take. And sometimes it takes some digging because you think you're doing some things like on the surface that are constructive when really you're denying what's truly what you truly want, what you truly know you should be doing.
Yeah, and some people will say, yeah, but what about and they'll give some extreme case of an abusive marriage or a horrible person, and they'll say, well, of course you want that to change. Again, it comes down to you. You can't change that person. You can set a boundary of what you will accept. And that may require you to end the marriage that's abusive. There's cheating or whatever going on in the marriage. You might say, now I'm not going to take that anymore and I'm going to go. But we can't force the other person to change their behavior. And even thinking about how we can do that doesn't work. It is interesting, though, that we can change our spouse by not trying to change our spouse, but by changing ourselves.
Exactly. And honestly, and that really is the only thing that will work to make a happier marriage, because if you wait for them to change themselves, then you might be too late and they might have given up on you by the time they get themselves sorted out. So you really have to start. That's the only option is working on yourself.
We have a great callback to earlier in the show when we were discussing objectification. There's a comment here asking, what is it about the mindset of women who are turned off by a man hitting on her? And usually making her the initiator and consequently reversing the poles. I think that this is often an issue of the woman wanting to have a man that is controllable because she doesn't trust her instinct to pick a man that she can surrender to. So she looks for a guy that she can control, who she's better than in some way, that she's able to control him, because she doesn't trust her picker. She doesn't trust her ability to choose a man that's safe to surrender to. And so she ends up looking for one she can control. And improving your ability to filter men, I think, would help a lot with those questions that women have. What do you think?
Well, either that, or she doesn't trust her ability to attract the man that she does want, because it's like she wants, if she had, full control over the universe, only attractive men would hit on her. And so she wants to create that situation while also eliminating unattractive men hitting on her. So by being controlling, you're right, she will have to be the initiator, because she's completely reversed the polarity by having that control of it. You can't, it doesn't happen like that. If you think about it, like I understand, I've been there 100%, but if you really think about it, what you want is a man who does take initiative and who does, want you sexually, does appreciate your beauty. And so the only way for you to see that, like, and believe it truly, is for it to be organic and his complete choice. There's no way to control someone into that where you would actually believe it. even if you somehow manipulated and made it happen, you're going to then be in a relationship where you don't believe that he really truly wants you because you took away that choice from him.
Yeah, and when we think about it, healthy man has a testosterone level maybe nowadays in mid 800s, something like that, or higher. And a healthy woman has a testosterone level maybe at 80, so a tenth, or lower. It can be 50 and still be healthy for a woman. So maybe 1/12. No, sorry, the man has 12 times as much testosterone. So it's natural that he's going to be the initiator of hitting on someone, because that is essentially long-term the initiation of sex, of a relationship that leads to sex. And you don't want to have to do that during the startup of the relationship, in part because it is a fact that women are less likely, even in a healthy marriage, they're less often the initiators of sex than the men. And that's how you get a dead bedroom, is if you get a guy that only initiates sex as often as a woman does. And you'll have like maybe three days to a week, a month where she'll initiate sex. And so that's very little sex then in the relationship, whereas he will be initiating it whenever he possibly can if he's healthy.
Right. And so there's that. And then there's like one of two options. You either get the dead bedroom, or maybe you'll be unlucky enough to get both, where he does want sex, but he'll take it from other women, because what he's shown is that he'll respond to her initiating. So then if he goes out into the world and some woman hits on him, then he's just found another opportunity. So you really, really, really do not want a man who allows you to do the initiating and controlling.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point you bring up, because I've said that to people and they're like, oh, women don't hit on men in public. And I mean, yes, my answer usually is they don't hit on you in public, they don't hit on men. It happens to me when I'm out with
men.
It almost always happens to me more when I'm out with other men, because usually I'm the senior man at the group, and I'm the kind of the group leader and stuff. And I've had women approach me and ask for my number while I'm talking to my friends. Tap me on the shoulder and ask me for my number. Not even have a conversation, just ask me for my contacts. And I'm not the 6 foot tall type guy that you normally think that's happening to. And it is, it's a different world for, if you're a 20-year-old guy and you've never accomplished anything and you're kind of passive looking, you'll never have that happen to you. You might not realize it's possible, but some of those guys start off there and then they end up very successful, and they end up, now women are hitting on them. And if their mentality is that they do basically what women want, their appearance may have changed, their outward signals of success may have changed, but now they're going to be very easily manipulatable by every woman that comes along. And that's not someone that a woman wants to be married to.
Well, and especially once they're married, then an unscrupulous woman sees, oh, he can commit. Oh, he's willing to buy cars and houses for people, so maybe he'll do that for me too. And married men get hit on way more. I mean, it's really well known that a woman puts on an engagement ring and she's not going to get as much attention. A man puts on a wedding ring and he's going to get double or triple the attention.
Yeah, it's the men understand that it could lead to a beatdown, and the women basically figure there's no risk to it, and they'll pursue it. There's a high potential for reward and no risk. Right. And there is a mindset in society, and we kind of saw that in the article we talked about objectifying, that men are some uncontrolled sexual beasts that just do whatever they're led to do. And that is, we see that article talking about it, but a lot of people have that mentality. I think it's why a lot of single women are hitting on men. They figure there's no negative consequence. The worst he can do is say no, but there's a high chance that they can turn him. And I actually find that's not true. That isn't really true in society. The actual most successful men that I meet, they tend to keep their word. They're men that keep their word, and that includes their marriage vows. Now, of course, that discounts couples where they have a agreement, I guess, where that's not included. But most of the time, that's how it works out. And it could be bias due to the people I associate with, but that's what I tend to find. And it is funny though, and it's usually the most dysfunctional women that are willing to hit on the married men.
Oh, absolutely.
And, yeah, they're dysfunctional in every way except for figuring out how to grab a man. That's the only thing they're good at.
In the short term, at least.
In the short term. They can't keep a hold of him.
No.
They can get him, but they can't keep a hold of him.
Yeah, and just the way that society, believes that, like, men are, the predators, and like we need to control men, and it's like, honestly, really, in reality, most men are good and moral and fine, and it's just a minority of them you really need to be on the lookout for. Same with women. Like, we've got this halo effect where like women can do no wrong, but there's still a minority of women that you need to be very, very careful of and not expose yourself.
And a woman tried to pick me up at a restaurant, and she was on a date with her boyfriend. And I see her, like, then when the server comes by, she ducks down a little bit. I'm like, what is she? Is she trying to duck out on a bill and say, we're going to pay for it? I thought it was a scam of some sort. And turns out that she was wanting to duck so her boyfriend didn't see that she was talking to me so that he would pay the bill for dinner.
Oh, wow.
just in case I didn't pay attention to her. And I've had lots of guys tell me similar stories to this.
Yeah.
And usually not that blatant. And there are always a few women, and men know they can usually pick out those women. Men are very good judges of people, because historically, if we didn't judge people well, we ended up dead, because we'd end up in an altercation with someone that we shouldn't mess with. And so we had to really have that high level of awareness and alertness. And we've lost it a lot in more modern times because the world's a pretty safe place. But we still have to have that awareness. And men know that. And most men are instantly repulsed by those kind of broken interactions. They're kind of intrigued about it the same way you look at a car wreck as you drive by. But it's not something that actually is interesting to us. It's been great speaking with you. We're heading up around the top of the hour now, so I think it's a good time to make a break, and we'll talk to you perhaps again in another interview. Where can people find you, Leila?
Yeah.
I have links in the comments, but in case you're listening to this, where is it that people can find you?
Yeah, that'd be great. So you are welcome to go sign up at LeilaTomasone.com, LeilaTomasone.com, and you can grab a freebie and be notified of where I'm at and what I'm doing. Of course, follow me on Twitter at LimitlessLeila, Leila. And I'd love to see you there. So thanks so much, Noah. It's been great.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And out we go. Whoop.
Thank you for watching our video, and I hope it inspired you to take action in your life. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video to get more agency building content. The real secret sauce is in our newsletter. Click on the link in the video description below to sign up. I promise I won't flood your inbox, and anything that we do send you will be of high value.